Arnold Schwarzenegger's empire is even bigger than most people realize. And it all starts with an unbelievable Hummer fleet, unlike anything owned by another Hollywood star. But those vehicles are only the beginning of a fortune that's been growing for decades. Let's get into it. Start with the Hummers, because that's the headline and it's real. Schwarzenegger didn't just buy a Hummer. He received the first civilian Hummer H1 in 1992. That single moment is arguably why the Hummer exists as a consumer vehicle at all. Schwarzenegger was influential in getting AM General's military-duty Humvee converted for civilian use in the 1990s. He saw the boxy, brutal military transport rolling around during a shoot and decided regular people needed to be able to buy one. AM General listened. The 10,000-pound, 10 mpg beastly ride would be the first of many in the actor's personal collection. That first H1 wasn't the end of it. General Motors later went on to secure the rights from AM General to market and distribute what would be the Hummer H2 in 2002, and the smaller, cheaper version sold even better, with drivers who didn't blink at the pump. Schwarzenegger kept adding to his personal fleet as the lineup grew. Arnold Schwarzenegger continues to add to his collection of Hummers and loves them to this day. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. By 2017, with fuel prices climbing and his own public image shifting toward clean energy advocacy, Schwarzenegger decided to convert one of his own H1s into something nobody had ever built before. Schwarzenegger decided he would convert one of his beloved Hummers into an EV variation, teaming up with Chrysler Electric to introduce the very first all-electric Hummer H1. He didn't just fund it from a distance, he showed up in Austria for the reveal. Battery specialist Chrysler Electric unveiled a conversion befitting the so-called Green Governor, with the man himself on hand to present the all-electric Hummer H1 at the company's new headquarters in Austria. It wasn't Chrysler's first project with him either. The former bodybuilder had become something of an ambassador for the electric motor company, acting as a spokesman at the unveiling of an electrified Mercedes-Benz G-Class earlier that year, and working alongside Chrysler's engineers in California on its ongoing testing and development. The specs on the electric H1 were no joke for a 2-month build. The battery electric Hummer H1 prototype features electric motors front and rear to preserve its AWD and deliver 360 kW of power, or 483 horsepower, while a 100 kWh battery pack provides nearly 300 kilometers of range on a full charge. That's a military-grade off-roader, pushing near 500 horsepower silently. Unsurprisingly, converting the H1 into an EV made it even heavier, weighing in at a hefty 3,300 kilograms. Schwarzenegger couldn't hide how much this meant to him. Standing at the unveiling, he joked about how far the technology had come, saying Chrysler had electrified his G-Class the winter before, and now a Hummer, and that if the company kept up that pace, he'd soon be flying to Austria from LA in an electric airplane. Chrysler's own co-founder, Marcus Chrysler, added that the prototype wasn't headed to mass production. It was there to prove a point, that a vehicle built like a tank could still, in his words, drive so quietly the sheep wouldn't be disturbed. That single sentence sums up the whole Hummer chapter of his empire. He took a war machine, made it street legal, made it famous, then made it electric, and never stopped collecting them along the way. But the Hummers are only the entry point, because next to them in the same garage sits something even heavier. If the Hummers are the headline, the M47 patent tank is the punchline nobody expects. Yes, an actual tank, sitting on his property in California, and it's not for show. Here's why it matters to him specifically. The M47 patent is the same model he drove during his compulsory military service in Austria in the 1960s. Before he was Mr. Universe, before Hollywood, an 18-year-old Schwarzenegger trained on this exact machine as a conscript in the Austrian army. Decades later, with money and no shortage of ambition, he decided to own one. Getting it wasn't simple. Schwarzenegger moved heaven and earth to get it back in his hands after many years, having to overcome a series of bureaucratic hurdles and international permits, both in Austria and the United States, before finally succeeding in bringing the tank to his property in California. This wasn't an impulse buy off a lot. It took international paperwork to get a Cold War tank legally onto a residential estate in Los Angeles. Once it landed, it became more than a lawn ornament. With a Chrysler V12 engine and massive weight, the M47 symbolizes the brute force that has defined much of his movie career. He's used it for stunts with friends, famously crushing a limousine on it alongside Jay Leno. And he's used it for something more meaningful. Schwarzenegger transformed his tank into a tool for the community, inviting underprivileged students through his after-school All-Stars program to experience what it's like to operate the massive machine, turning it into a reward, a motivation, and a reminder of discipline, instead of locking it away as a private collectible. He's even let a teenager with cystic fibrosis get behind the controls, turning a war machine into a moment kids remember for the rest of their lives. The tank isn't traveling alone in that garage. Sitting near it is a military-spec Dodge M37, a genuine Korean War-era cargo truck. Its closest civilian counterpart would have been the Dodge Power Wagon, but Schwarzenegger's M37 truck is a true decommissioned example that he had fully restored to its former glory, looking virtually just as it had during the 1950s. Next to that, a Mercedes-Benz Unimog U1300, a diesel workhorse built to plow through mud, snow, and steep grades that would stop a normal SUV cold. And then there's the vehicle that got him in trouble. In 2019, days after a widely publicized bike ride with teenage climate activist Greta Thunberg, cameras caught him running errands in something that looked like it rolled straight out of a war film. He was spotted driving an Austrian-origin, six-wheel drive, all-terrain military vehicle called the Pinsgor, a massive 6WD military vehicle with a payload capacity of 2.5 tons. That doesn't qualify as an eco-friendly vehicle by any standard. The internet noticed the contradiction immediately. The pictures went viral on the internet in no time, with social media users ridiculing what they called his hypocritical behavior. He didn't exactly hide from it either. Around that same period, he'd been outspoken for years about pushing hydrogen and electric infrastructure across California, while still very publicly loving vehicles that guzzle diesel and gas like they're going out of style. That tension, climate advocate by day, tank owner by weekend, became something people just accepted as part of the Schwarzenegger package. He wasn't apologizing for the collection. If anything, the vehicles became more famous because of the contradiction. Taken together, the garage tells a story on its own. A Hummer fleet that changed automotive history, a tank that connects him to his own military service, a restored army truck, a diesel workhorse, and a Swiss Army knife of a vehicle that got him roasted online. That's not a normal car collection, that's a private motor pool. But vehicles, no matter how many tons of steel they weigh, are still just toys compared to what's actually generating the money behind them. To understand how he can afford a private tank collection, you have to follow the money back to where it actually comes from. And that means real estate. Long before there was a tank in the driveway, there was an apartment building in Santa Monica. This is where the fortune actually starts, and it starts earlier than almost anyone expects. In his own account, Schwarzenegger put approximately $27,500 down on a 6-unit apartment building in Santa Monica listed for $240,000, funded by earnings from bodybuilding competitions and side businesses, and sold the property 2 years later for $400,000. That flip, made while he was still a bodybuilder, with a thick accent and small movie roles, set the pattern for the rest of his life. His first business venture was actually a bricklaying business in Southern California that he started with fellow bodybuilder Franco Columbu in 1968. And the two men used the money they made from that business to invest in a mail-order fitness equipment business. Every dollar got recycled into the next deal. The results came fast. He became Mr. Universe at 20 and moved to the US, invested in real estate, flipped apartments, started that bricklaying business, and by 25, he was a millionaire, a successful real estate investor and entrepreneur. That's before Conan, before The Terminator, before Predator. He was already rich from property before Hollywood ever paid him a real salary. His approach diverged from the typical path of an aspiring actor. Rather than chasing auditions on a shoestring budget, he prioritized income-producing property, using rental income to fund his goals instead of relying on an uncertain entertainment career. Once the movie money did start rolling in, and it rolled in hard, with him commanding $20, $30 million per picture at his peak. He didn't stop buying property, he just bought bigger. Today, the residential side of that empire centers on Brentwood. Arnold Schwarzenegger's house is a sprawling $20 million estate nestled in the hills of Brentwood, Los Angeles. The sprawling property sits on more than 2.5 acres of land, and boasts 7 bedrooms and bathrooms, with various living spaces, a chef's kitchen, a gym, and a games room with a pool table, while the grounds include a swimming pool and tennis court. The backyard isn't just landscaping. The centerpiece is a stunning infinity pool that seems to spill over into the canyon below, surrounded by fire pits and a full outdoor kitchen setup. There's even a small working farm on the grounds. The grounds have ample space and a stable for Schwarzenegger's unique selection of pets, including a donkey named Lulu, a miniature horse named Whiskey, a pig named Schnelly, and dogs named Schnitzel, Cherry, and Dutch. The Brentwood Mansion isn't his only residence. Over the years, he's held properties scattered across the country and beyond. He's had houses in Sun Valley, Idaho, mansions in Hyannisport, Massachusetts, apartments at a private island in British Columbia, and a property in Venice, Italy. The Sun Valley home in particular puts him in the same zip code, quite literally, as some of the wealthiest people on the planet. It's the same small Idaho town that hosts the annual gathering nicknamed Billionaire Summer Camp every July. And it's not just personal homes. Schwarzenegger has also invested in commercial real estate, including office buildings and shopping centers, further diversifying his portfolio. That commercial side is harder to pin an exact number on. Plenty of the specific dollar figures floating around online about his commercial holdings don't hold up to scrutiny. But the broad strokes are consistent across every source. Apartment buildings, retail centers, and office space, built up patiently over 5 decades rather than bought all at once. Estimates on the total value of his real estate portfolio bounce around depending on who's counting, with figures ranging anywhere from around $40 million just for his personal homes, up to $100, $200 million once you fold in the commercial side. Either way, the property empire alone would make most people set for life. For Schwarzenegger, it was just the base layer. Because the biggest single asset in his entire fortune isn't a house, a Hummer, or a tank. It's a stock certificate most fans have never heard of. Here's the part of Arnold Schwarzenegger's empire that never makes the highlight reel, and it's the one actually worth the most money. In 1996, Arnold paid an undisclosed amount for a 5% stake in an investment firm called Dimensional Fund Advisors, at a time when the firm managed around $12 billion worth of assets. Dimensional Fund Advisors, known as DFA, wasn't a household name then and still isn't now to most casual investors. It's a quiet, index-style investment firm based out of Austin, Texas, built on academic finance theory rather than flashy stock picks. What made Schwarzenegger buy in wasn't star power or celebrity networking. He was apparently drawn to DFA in part because its co-founder, David Booth, studied under the late economist Milton Friedman, one of his self-described intellectual heroes. This wasn't a passive celebrity endorsement deal. He actually understood the pitch and believed in the underlying investing philosophy. Then he did something almost nobody in Hollywood does. He held on and never sold. DFA has grown from that original $12 billion under management to crossing $1 trillion in global assets under management as of February 2026. That's not a typo. A firm managing $12 billion when he bought in now oversees more than $1 trillion. His slice of that growth, still sitting untouched decades later, is now estimated to be worth nearly $500 million, a stake he's diamond-handed to this very day. His financial advisor, Paul Wachter, has told the story of just how disciplined Schwarzenegger was with this position. After the market crash of 2009, when plenty of wealthy people panicked and started liquidating, Schwarzenegger did the opposite. He told Wachter directly not to sell anything, and Wachter has recalled that Schwarzenegger simply knew that wasn't the time to get out. Wachter has separately called the DFA position one of the most incredible investments he's personally witnessed in decades of managing money for high net worth clients. And he said Schwarzenegger will likely only cash out if the company itself goes public. That single stock position is now worth more than his entire real estate portfolio combined, more than his movie salaries from any single era of his career, and more than every vehicle in his garage stacked together, tank included. It's the single biggest reason his fortune keeps climbing years after he stopped being a box office headliner. Of course, the money didn't only come from real estate and one lucky stock pick. Schwarzenegger spent decades stacking smaller ventures on top of each other, and together they built out the rest of the empire. In 1991, Schwarzenegger joined fellow action stars Sylvester Stallone and Bruce Willis, as well as Demi Moore, as investors in the Planet Hollywood restaurant chain. Before cutting ties with the chain in 2000, he's joked openly about the timing of that exit, in his own words. Reflecting on the mentors and friends who shaped his investing instincts, he said he even learned something from Planet Hollywood, namely knowing exactly when to get out, and that he did just that. Getting out before the chain's later financial troubles is now viewed as one of his sharper business calls. He didn't stop at restaurants. He also opened Shatsy on Main Restaurant and engaged broadly in the real estate market alongside these other ventures. On the film production side, Schwarzenegger co-founded Oak Productions and Synergy Pictures, production companies responsible for producing several of his own blockbuster films, meaning he wasn't just collecting a salary as an actor. He owned a stake in the machinery, producing the movies themselves. Then there's fitness, the industry he never really left, even after bodybuilding ended. Schwarzenegger founded the nutritional supplement company Ladder in 2018 with partner LeBron James, and the company was sold in 2020 for an undisclosed amount. He's also stayed connected to the sport that made him famous in the first place. He is the owner of Arnold Sports Festival, a sports and fitness festival he started in 1989, held annually in Columbus, Ohio, that hosts thousands of international health and fitness professionals, and has expanded into a 3-day expo. Add in decades of endorsement deals, representing labels like BMW, Dimensional Fund Advisors, Lidl, and Planet Hollywood aside from his own ventures, and you start to see the full shape of it. Movies made him famous. Real estate made him rich early. DFA made him seriously wealthy without him lifting a finger. And a rotating cast of restaurants, supplements, and production companies filled in the gaps. All of that money had to go somewhere besides bank accounts and shopping centers, though. And for Schwarzenegger, a meaningful chunk of it went straight into machines. The kind that fly and the kind that roll on treads. By the time you add everything up, the movies, the property, the DFA stake, the businesses, you get a fortune that different outlets peg anywhere from a few $100 million to over $1 billion, depending on how conservatively they count his private holdings. But the number that matters more for this story is what that money actually turned into. Sitting in his garage and on the tarmac, start back where we began with the vehicles, because now the price tags make sense. At the height of his movie career in the early 2000s, Schwarzenegger bought a $38 million Gulfstream III private jet, a luxury aircraft with enough room for 15 passengers to travel in custom comfort. He wasn't chasing the flashiest jet on the market, either, by his own account. He opted for the standard aircraft model, demonstrating a preference for functionality over extravagance, and eschewing any luxury upgrades, explaining that his primary reason for acquiring the jet was to facilitate an efficient commute between his residence and workplace. Even his idea of extravagance came with a practical excuse attached. He didn't fly that same jet forever, either. In 2017, he replaced his earlier Gulfstream with a Bombardier Challenger 350, valued at $11 million, and he's kept a private helicopter in regular rotation. On top of that, for shorter hops around Southern California. Between the jet, the helicopter, the Hummers, the tank, the Army truck, the Unimog, and the Pinsgore. That got him mocked online. You're looking at a private transportation fleet that could move him, and a small platoon by air, road, or off-road terrain at a moment's notice. None of it notably sits untouched behind velvet rope. The tank gets used for charity rides and to teach kids discipline. Schwarzenegger reportedly uses the tank to help raise funds for charity, making it a practical as well as an impressive addition to his collection. And he even offers rides in it for a cause, showing his dedication to giving back in creative ways. The Hummers he's driven publicly for decades, treating them less like static collectibles and more like daily-use machines that happen to weigh 5 tons. The electric H1 conversion wasn't locked in a vault either. It was a public statement, driven and shown off specifically to prove the technology could work. That instinct, buy it, use it, show people what it can actually do, runs through basically everything he's built. He didn't just invest in DFA quietly and disappear. He stayed publicly connected to it, talked about it, credited its founder as an intellectual influence. He didn't just own Planet Hollywood. He sat at the table with Stallone and Willis, building the brand before deciding to walk away at the right time. He didn't just buy apartment buildings, he lived through the actual work of flipping them. As a young immigrant with an accent nobody in Hollywood wanted to hire, the tank sitting in his California garage right now is arguably the clearest symbol of the entire empire, because it ties every era of his life together in one machine. It's the same model he trained on as a teenage conscript in Austria, bought back decades later with American movie money, funded in part by real estate deals, and a stock position most people will never touch, and now used to teach a new generation of kids something about discipline rather than sitting untouched as a private trophy. The Hummer fleet is what gets people clicking. It's the visual. Rows of oversized, military-shaped vehicles parked outside a Brentwood mansion. One of them silently electric, one of them sitting a few feet from an actual battle tank. But that fleet was never really the whole story. It's the most visible tip of a fortune that started with a $27,500 down payment on a 6-unit apartment building, grew through decades of disciplined real estate buying, got supercharged by a stock bet almost nobody in his industry would have made, and eventually became large enough to fund a private motor pool that looks like it belongs to a small nation, rather than one actor, whatever the exact number on his net worth turns out to be this year. The empire behind it was never built by accident. Every property, every business, every vehicle traces back to the same instinct. That got an 18-year-old from a small Austrian village onto a tank in the first place. Take what you're given, put it to work, and never stop adding to the collection. Sources: Parade, Arnold Schwarzenegger's net worth in 2026. Celebrity net worth: Arnold Schwarzenegger. New Atlas, Kreisel and Schwarzenegger show off all-electric Hummer. GM Authority: the Arnold introduces an electric Hummer H1. Motor Biscuit: Arnold Schwarzenegger owned the first gas and electric Hummers. Carbuzz: Arnold Schwarzenegger shows off world's first electric Hummer H1. Motor Authority: Arnold Schwarzenegger's dream of an electric Hummer H1. Vocal Media: 12 expensive things owned by Arnold Schwarzenegger. How Shine Home: Arnold Schwarzenegger's luxurious LA house. Love Money: how Arnold Schwarzenegger and his 5 children make their money. Cars for Sale: Arnold Schwarzenegger's car collection. Classic Motors for Sale: Arnold Schwarzenegger's crazy classic car collection. Luxury Launches: Arnold Schwarzenegger spotted driving a tank-like military vehicle. TORK US: why Arnold Schwarzenegger's tank stands out in his collection. TORK US: the M47 patent in Schwarzenegger's garage. Celebrity Owners: what businesses does Arnold Schwarzenegger own? Ask.com: the business ventures of Arnold Schwarzenegger. Market Realist: Arnold Schwarzenegger's portfolio. ARC7: Arnold Schwarzenegger's real estate portfolio. Durham Real Estate Investors Club: Arnold Schwarzenegger's real estate investment mantra. The Richest: here's how Arnold Schwarzenegger earns and spends his fortune. Boss Hunting: Arnold Schwarzenegger's net worth quietly crosses $1.1 billion. Yahoo Finance: Terminator, governor and now billionaire. Simple Flying: a deep dive into Arnold Schwarzenegger's private jet. Wikipedia: Arnold Schwarzenegger. The Sports Rush: how much is Arnold Schwarzenegger worth? https://thesportsrush.com/bodybuilding news. How much is Arnold Schwarzenegger worth? Fox News: Arnold Schwarzenegger reportedly drives tank to run errands.